Welcome back to another segment of What's Up with Nick and Chuck. I'm Andy, the marketing guy from HUI. This week the guys will be talking with Josh Talsky, an industrial designer, and the topic they'll be talking about is scale when it comes to industrial design. So with that, I'll send you to Nick and Chuck.
Hey everybody, welcome back.
Hey everybody.
Today we have with us Josh Talsky, an industrial designer that we utilize here at HUI. Also joining us again is Mark Collins. Hey guys.
How you doing, Chuck?
Josh, would you be able to take and introduce yourself to our audience today?
Sure. Yeah. My name's Josh Talsky. I'm an industrial designer. I do freelance work for various companies around the area, helping them with any design services they might need.
All right, so for today, what we want to spend our time talking to Josh about is around scale and the importance of designing the scale. So Josh, if you could maybe start by talking to us about why is it important to design to scale from an industrial design standpoint?
Yeah, for me, designing to scale is pretty important. It's extremely important. I'm a freelance designer, so I'm coming at it from that angle. If you don't design things to scale, you're going to end up surprising your client in the end when you finally go to CAD modeling or a refined concept, and that's never good. You don't want to surprise your client at the end when they've invested so much time and energy into this project that you're working on. So I like to get into it right at the beginning, as early as possible. Sometimes that's not at the beginning. Maybe dimensions are defined later on in the project. But as soon as there's dimensions defined, then I like to create an underlay and start by developing concepts around that underlay.
Now, Mark, how does that affect some of the efforts from an engineering standpoint when you have an industrial designer that's providing you concepts that are to scale?
Well, I tell you, if you get a concept that's not to scale, it's impossible, because you end up having the conversation that Josh just mentioned with your customer about, hey, I know you had this slim, tall design, and now we're going to make it short and fat because we got to make stuff fit. So, to sum it all up, if the concept is too skinny and too tall, you end up in engineering making it shorter and fatter.
So this question's posed for the two of you. When doesn't it matter? When doesn't it matter to have things to scale?
Sure. So for me, there's a few times when it doesn't matter. As an industrial designer, there's a lot of sketching early on. So sometimes, like I said, you don't have the project figured out and the dimensions figured out. So you kind of give it your best guess, but you do sketch around some rough idea. Or maybe you're just working on some details and you want to convey the idea more than the dimensions, the appropriate dimensions. So sometimes you'll just sketch a detail, and if it's off an inch or something, that might not matter depending on what you're trying to convey, the idea that you're trying to convey.
I would say it's always important. There's certainly times where it's it's just more of a time constraint, right? So you're doing a simple free body diagram or something that you would not worry too much about scale as long as it's simple. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's better if it was to scale.
Yeah, I've been in plenty of brainstorming sessions where we're just kind of coming up with almost trying to develop the idea, almost like trying to develop the scope that you're going to use to create the project. And in those sessions, you're talking really, really rough sketches, almost like stick man type of sketches. In those scenarios, you don't have to worry about scale so much. But I agree with Mark. As soon as you have that information, you should immediately start designing to scale.
Josh, you'd mentioned that you develop overlays, real simple overlays. What do you mean? What is an overlay?
Sure. Oh, sorry. It's actually, I call them an underlay, but they have different names. But yeah, an underlay is essentially let's say that somebody wants to design a cart, and they want it to be maybe a foot wide, 18 inches deep, and 3 feet tall. If I know that information, I immediately try to go into a CAD modeling program like SolidWorks, develop a model, a really rudimentary model, like essentially just a square or a box or cube, I might even add in some, if I know that there's going to be like 4-inch, 5-inch casters, I might add those like essentially cylinders at the bottom, just to give me an idea of how big that space is. And then I can use that to go and develop concepts. And I essentially create that in, if I'm working on my computer and sketching on my Wacom tablet, I'll use that as an underlay in, as a separate layer in Photoshop, and then kind of like hide that, put it at like 10% opacity and sketch over that and other layers. The old school way of doing it is just printing it out on a piece of paper and then putting another piece of paper over it and using that, not so much tracing it, but using that to kind of guide you to make sure that you're within the dimensions.
Sure.
What about, Josh, when the device, I'm thinking of OEM device manufacturers, right, in medical. What about when the device isn't designed yet? Like, we're designing the cart at the same time we're designing the device, so not a lot of concrete information is there. How does that play a part into scale?
Yeah, the best, again, as much information as possible, I'll use to my advantage. So for example, if you said it's a cart, maybe if I have no information, I know at the very least, maybe it's got to fit through a door. Okay, we got to have it be able to do that. Will somebody be standing and maybe writing on top of this? Then that creates a certain height for, I don't remember offhand, but it's a specific height so that they're not crouched over. So then ergonomics come into play. If there's a monitor, same idea. You want the monitor presented in a height that's comfortable for the person using it. So those kind of things all play a factor. Just to get as much information about what we're designing, it'll help us create dimensions on their own. And then from there, again, you go back to creating a SolidWorks model or a CAD model, and then use that for your underlay. And if anything, you just know you have a little more freedom from there to manipulate the proportions as you see fit.
Do you have any horror stories on scale?
I mean, yeah, I guess I could say, sure. The best thing I can think about is when we design something that usually, at least for me, it was like when I just got out of school, or maybe when I was an intern, and I just took too much pride or arrogance in my abilities, and was just like, yeah, I can kind of eyeball that up, and just kind of and developed a concept around an eyeball essentially. Then it eventually got to the point the client likes it, they want to go forward with it. We start going to CAD, and obviously it doesn't fit. And then when we show it to the client, they're just like, this isn't what I signed off on. And now you put in a really bad situation where you have to explain that you didn't know what you weren't doing your job properly, and you sold them a bill of goods that, that was wrong. And now the ball's in their court if they want to continue with the project or manipulate this in some way. It just gets really bad. It ends up being a waste of their time, a waste of their money. And it could have all been fixed if in that case, if I would have taken more time to develop the underlays that I had mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Is the reason being that people can go faster, Josh, if they don't go by scale, if they don't follow that scale measure?
And that's everybody's got their own reasoning for it, but yeah, definitely you would save time in the short term. It's one of those things, measure twice, cut once. The opposite is, you want to save time in the beginning rather than open up SolidWorks for me and develop a CAD model, then bring that into Photoshop and develop an underlay, and then use that to sketch up. You can just bring out a piece of paper and start drawing. Of course, that saves a lot of time in the early rounds, but it'll catch up to you. Every single thing that you get wrong eventually catches up with you in the end. So you're just better off essentially creating a process for yourself and following that process as closely as you can.
Yeah, I know Mark and I have had conversations in the past with clients about how important it is to do scale, because there's nothing worse than showing up with a cart that's short and fat when initially it was tall, skinny, and it fit the profile that they were initially signed off on, kind of like what you were describing before. Right. We can definitely understand that.
Yeah, and also I know working with you guys, it's not just the cart itself, but there might be some peripheral accessories that are added on, maybe a heart monitor or something that, some other boxes that have to go in there, and those have certain dimensions. And so, again, like now you're getting the cart the wrong size because you didn't create an underlay. Now you don't even know if the shelf is the right height to fit this this box essentially into there, and is it deep enough, et cetera, et cetera. And like I said, every single item down the line that you get wrong just makes it more difficult to fix later on.
Well, and I remember being in conversations, you were on a project with us where the client was asking dimensions, like they wanted you to give them a rough dimension, like what was your assumptions on a shelf, or what was your assumptions on the height, and so it makes that conversation a lot easier when you can say, well, let me pull up my CAD, right? Let me pull up the actual, what I was basing it off of.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I did have the rudimentary CAD model, basically another screen, and I could literally just pull dimensions off of it, and it helped tremendously. I thought it helped tremendously. I'm sure it helped you guys after I left the meeting. So, and it really wasn't. It helped me when I was designing, because I knew for a fact that all of these products would fit within the envelope that I was drawing. So, and I think there was like 5 or 6 different products that went on that cart. So it was really important to get those dimensions right.
So Josh, if you showed me a picture of your underlay or overlay, it would basically just be like stacks of simple boxes or cylinders?
Yeah, more or less. They would be combined into a really rudimentary, like I said, almost like a Lincoln Logs type of looking thing, that it doesn't look good, but it's to scale, and you can then draw over that.
Sure.
Hopefully your sketch looks good.
Right.
So that's another thing when we're talking about scale that we haven't really mentioned yet. Right now, all the focus has been on sketching and CAD modeling. But another thing is mock-ups. And, we do that a lot too, designers, and I'm sure engineers. I know you do. I've seen you do mock-ups, Mark, where you want to create this thing to scale, and you, instead of like waiting for a 3D printed part or, some sort of a very expensive model, you can just take some, plywood and foam core and just chop up something so that, for example, what you were mentioning, where somebody wheels this in and you immediately know that this is not the right height or it's uncomfortable to use. If you had taken the time, and maybe you did, I'm not sure, but if you had taken the time, the team or the project team had taken the time to create a mock-up that they could interact with physically, then you can learn a lot just from that. And again, scale's extremely important when you're starting to do those kind of things.
That's some great information. Thanks for sharing that with us, and we appreciate your time today to join us on What's Up with Nick and Chuck.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Chuck.
All right, guys, we're going to close this episode of What's Up with Nick and Chuck. Tune in next week for our next series on industrial design. We're going to have Josh back with us again, and we are going to be talking about surface modeling and how that impacts the industrial design. Take care, everybody.
Bye.